Welcome to Make the Game. My name is Matt Hackett. Thanks so much for being here. We are now 10 episodes in, which seems like a good time to start season 2, where the theme is food. To celebrate, I'll include one of my own custom recipes with my newsletter, email only, during season 2. Sign up at Valadria.com. Coming up is an entire episode about food and cooking and how that relates to game development. But today we're talking with David Stark, the developer of Airships, Conquer the Skies. Let's jump in.
You're listening to Make the Game with Matt Hackett.
Well, David, thanks for joining me today. It's really good of you to be here. I'm excited to talk about your game, Airships, Conquer the Skies. But first, I think it's fun to do some icebreakers, and I thought it might be fun to ask you, what are some of your favorite video games?
Sure. So there's a few games which I play kind of obsessively. There's most recently RimWorld. I like games about horrible things happening to small simulated people. And so there's also Crusader Kings for kind of the same reason. And the other one I've been playing a lot is Vintage Story, which is kind of like Minecraft, but it's more kind of survival focused, which really just hooks into my weird interests in like history and it's kind of technological development. Like, when did people develop pottery? What was that even like? All that kind of thing.
Ooh, I love that. Have you heard of a game? It's a card game, a real life card game. It's called Timeline. Does that ring any bells?
Maybe. I've played maybe a similar one, or maybe I'm just misremembering the name. You sort of put down these cards and kind of develop technologies. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, it's like my wife and I would play this. We played this version of Timeline. It was just inventions, and so you get these cards, and it would be like, when was the pottery wheel invented, or when was the shaving razor invented, and you put them in the timeline. You have to sort them by like when they came out. Sounds like something you'd like.
Oh yeah, that sounds fun actually. Yeah. I really like some of the weird process of inventing things. Like, for example, if you want to, you can ask me about matches. The history of matches is absolutely horrifying.
Very cool. Wait, matches? Do you mean like the kind that you use to light a fire?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. Let's maybe get into that later. What was the thing I was going to say? Matches. Let's get into this one. What's some of your favorite foods? What are some of your favorite dishes to eat? I'm obsessed with food recently, and especially pertains to game development.
So I mean, I definitely like Indian food. That's what I just had.
Oh, cool.
What I just had now. And yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite dishes is this pasta dish, which is made with kind of a sauce made out of grated zucchini with spinach balls in it. It's very tasty. It's one of the dishes that's technically vegetarian, but also is actually mostly cheese. So
I love it.
It's probably not actually good for you, but it's very tasty.
Oh, that's the best kind of food, right? And do you do any cooking on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I do quite a lot of cooking. I probably much like you, I really enjoy doing something kind of physical with my hands, which isn't, like with programming, you're out there and you're thinking about all of these abstract concepts. Yes. It's really nice to just chop some vegetables. You've chopped the vegetables.
Yes.
Do something with them.
You get that tactile feeling, like chopping celery or, yeah.
Exactly, yes.
Spinning, stirring up a stew with your hands, like a wooden spoon. It feels good. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I found, I know it's not everybody, but a lot of game developers I've found are into other things like cooking and also like music making and stuff. It's like, I feel like the creativity we try to stuff into game development sometimes explodes out of it into other areas in life,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anything you can do with your hands, anything that sort of feels like I mean, as a game developer, you're always trying to abstract as much as you can. You're always trying to, be clever about things. And it's really nice to do something where actually you can't really be clever. You're just going to have to put in the work.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I watch a ton of cooking shows, and they're always telling the contestants, they're like, less is more, simple, fewer ingredients, right? Like, I love the challenges where it's like, I have a cooking book. It's called I think it's 5 and 5, but it's 5 minutes and you get five ingredients, and the dishes are made around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that kind of stuff because, as game developers, we have a tendency to put everything, over scope, stuff.
Oh yes, very much so. Yes.
I love that. I also like that. This is a segue into game dev, I swear. But I can go into the kitchen and cook for half an hour, and I have a finished product, right? Whereas like video games, I think we were talking somewhere on Twitter or something, but it was like 9 years that you've been working on
Yes.
Airships, Conquer the Skies, and like
Yes.
I love that. With food you can crank it out. You could make, in those 9 years you've been working on your game, you might have made 1,000 cheeseburgers, right? And so I like to kind of compare and contrast the things. So good segue into Airships Conquer the Skies. Super interesting game. I have so many questions for you. It's such an interesting case. I was just playing your game yesterday, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. I was kind of researching it a little bit. You launched on Steam August 16th, 2018. So that's a healthy chunk of time away. That's 4 years, right?
It's actually worse than that. That's the 1.0 release. The original early access release was back in 2015.
Oh, interesting. So I didn't know that about Steam. I used to be on Steam all the time back when I had other indie games and stuff, and now I'm getting back into it. So I guess the date there shows the date that you went, so you went V10. Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. So it stopped being early access, which I feel admit is a bit of an arbitrary milestone, but I felt like, okay, yeah, now we can stand behind it and say like, okay, it's good. And I kept on working on it anyway.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by that, especially. So like some of the things that are different about Airships is, I think for one, as a consumer, when gamers come into your page, one of the first things they're going to notice is that this is a premier game. At the $25 price point is really interesting, especially, have you heard of like Vampire Survivors? There's this wave of hyper casual games coming in, and they're like $3. And you wonder like, how does anyone pay the bills with such a small price tag? And $25 is one of the higher ones I've seen for indie games, and it still seems to be selling really strong, over 4,000 reviews, and I think that's amazing. I'm very impressed by that. And I was wondering, like, have you had pushback on the price? Is it are users happy?
So yeah, I went up from $15 to $25 like about a year ago or so, and I was kind of scared if people were going to go, oh no, this is too much. And before, when it was $15, I actually got some comments saying like, this game is really cheap, and that's not happening anymore. But I haven't really heard any comments saying, oh, this game is too expensive.
Really?
So I think that's fine. And I would say that for indie games, from what I've seen, the sort of the pain boundary is like $30. Like if you're going to go above $30, people are really going to be a bit like, and then yeah, it's. I mean, I like to think about this. You have to think about it from two perspectives. One is the sort of perspective of a player who's sort of thinking of it in terms of like, how much is this worth to me? And then the other perspective, like, is sort of, what price point is actually going to get you, what price point is going to get you the most money? Like, if you just look at it very coldly, and you basically look at how many units it will sell, and you multiply it by the amount of money, and then ideally find the magical amount where number of units times price is the highest number. But of course, in practice, it's not that simple, because people understandably have feelings and opinions about how much games ought to cost.
Yeah, exactly. Can I ask, when you launched on early access, was it paid? And was it, if so, was the price lower than the $15 it was previously at?
Yeah, so the very first version was available on itch.io in like early 2014, and that was $5. And then in 2015, on Steam it was 10. I went up to 15 after a few years, and now to 25. So I made the decision specifically that I always wanted it to be paid, because I felt that there was this danger that if went from unpaid to paid, I would lose everyone because they'd be like, oh, no, it costs money. So
Right.
build up this huge community of people who liked it because it was free, and then I would lose them all. So it was like, okay, right from the start, you don't have to pay that much, but I want you to pay something. I think that worked pretty well.
Very interesting. Wow. Yeah, I didn't know it first launched on itch. And so has it been the kind of thing where like the early access style, or even starting with itch, like the development's been kind of paid for by the fans to push it forward?
Yes, eventually. So I started out doing doing contract work, non-game related stuff, web development, tool development, and so on. And so I financed the first maybe 2 years or so of development like that. And then eventually the game became successful enough that I could kind of ramp down on doing contract work. And nowadays I basically support myself from it. I think it's a very important question with indie games. It's always like, well, how do you pay your bills? Because even if you have a game that's eventually successful, you still need to somehow pay for making it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Like that upfront cost. Yeah, that's currently what I'm doing. Is I worked for several years at a decent paying job and stacked money away, and I've got about another year and a half or so runway to make my game. And that is something a lot of indies got to figure out. I think a kind of hidden secret among indies too is you'll see like someone's Twitter page and they're like, yeah, I'm a full-time indie, but then like the secret is there's a ton of contract work. Right. And like some indies too will have like a full-time job, but they won't even tell you about it. Right. For some reason.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very bad attitude because it really gives people the wrong impression. There was I can't remember now, there was a British game developer who tweeted recently saying, well, actually in the UK there's like multiple well-known indie game developers who are literally land-owning gentry. So like they come from like old money, and that's okay. Yeah, that's one way of financing it. Obviously, not everyone is like that, but if you don't tell people about this, if you're not open about it, you can really give people a very wrong impression. It can be really dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I like the honesty, I like the transparency. So here's a question. So this is a game that you've been working on, wow, since 2014, is that right? Or is it?
Yeah, exactly. That? Yeah, 2013, in fact, yes.
Wow. And so do you have a cadence to your updates? Do they just happen when they happen, or do you try to do it, monthly, or how do you handle your updates? Because there must have been so many over the years, right?
Yeah, so I've never committed to a specific cadence because I felt, well, sometimes some stuff is easy and sometimes it's hard. I don't want to tell people, oh, there's going to be one every month. And generally, the way it works is that I basically do big updates that add features. And then there's a flurry of small updates that fix the bugs I introduced with the new features.
Love it.
That's basically how it works. And with the very big update I did like a month ago, there it was this whole process where I basically was running two versions of the game separately, two separate code bases for years. And that was very painful. I don't actually recommend doing that at all.
How did that come to be? Why did the two code bases exist together?
So basically, there were a bunch of features I still wanted to put into the game, like co-op combat and diplomacy and a more kind of detailed map. And I felt that instead of sort of drip reading this into the game, it would be much better if I basically did one big update that added these things at once. Also because they were connected to each other, also because I felt that if I make one big update, that gives people a reason to actually come back to the game and be like, oh, this is cool, rather than like, oh, here's another feature. But that meant in practice, of course, I had to do a huge amount of work sort of off to the side while simultaneously still fixing bugs and adding smaller feature to the main game.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. Have you merged those together? Is it back to the one?
Yes, it is now. And I'm extremely happy about it.
I'm very happy.
There's a huge amount of overhead, which is why I said I recommend it.
While talking about the tech, I noticed it was built in Java. Very cool. It gets you that sweet cross-platform. It's on Windows. It's on OS X. It's on. I was playing out my Steam Deck, which runs Linux, which is very cool. How did you learn Java? Did you go to school, or are you self-taught?
Yeah, I learned some Java at university, and then I actually worked several years as a Java developer doing user interfaces and other stuff like that, web stuff. So I kind of knew it from my normal work. And then when I wanted to make games, it was sort of a natural choice to go for. I didn't want to get into, learning C or C++. Unity back then was like just about starting to be a thing, but it was more like it's this weird thing that you can use on the Mac to make web games, and not like, the game engine everyone uses.
Right.
Going with Java certainly made sense, even though, there's actually very few games, apart from Minecraft, that have actually been developed in Java.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting to see. I love that like Java is cross-platform. My understanding is it's relatively nice to work with because it's clean and organized, if a bit verbose. It's I use C# and Unity, and I've heard they have a lot in common. Java.
Oh yes, extremely.
C#.
I've done work with Unity since, and it was like, yeah, this is just Java, isn't it? Yeah.
Nice. Here's a question: would you make your next game in Java as well, or are you tired of the tech stack?
This is actually a question I've been asking myself a lot. So,
oh, really? Interesting.
Not Java, not because of the tech stack, but because of the problem of just it not being well supported on the desktop. Basically, Microsoft worked very hard to destroy Java on the desktop because they saw it as a threat. Apple eventually kind of joined in on the kicking it, and nowadays Java is basically a server-side technology. It gets used a lot in enterprise programming servers and so on, so it's alive and well there. But if you actually want to do Java-based game development, you're just extremely by yourself. If something goes wrong, it's like, no one knows where the problem is. No, you're the only person using this technology stack for. I know of like one other developer who is actively using Java for new projects, and it's just like, okay, that's like two of us. So it's just from that practical point of view, I would use something else. But I don't actually know what that something else is going to be. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said Unity, but Unity has done so much has had so much bad press, has done so much recently.
What are they thinking?
To just sort of say, well, we don't really care about their core product. And I hear so much screaming from friends on Twitter and so on about how it's really awful to work with, that I really don't know. Maybe Unity, maybe Godot, maybe Unreal, maybe something else. But I don't know at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so relatable. I think a lot of developers are in that ship right now, where they're like, okay, I can tell I don't want to move forward with what I currently have. And for a lot of people, that's Unity, because they're making such stupid decisions, and they're even like moving away from games a bit, right?
I think the problem is that their main source of income isn't games, and so it's very tempting to have kind of a tail wagging the dog kind of thing, where they focus on everything that isn't actually what's meant to be their core product.
Right. Yeah, it's very strange. Like it's so annoying too, because I've spent years now learning Unity, and my hope is that like Godot seems to be borrowing heavily from Unity's UX. So I'm hoping that transition down the road to free open source software, which wouldn't that be amazing?
Yes, absolutely. I've used it a bit, and I'm actually really really happy with it. It's nice. Not perfect, but it's actually pretty nice. I think one problem that is definitely going to have even long term is just if you ever want to target consoles, then with Godot you're kind of lost because of the proprietary APIs you have to integrate with. So
yeah, I think that'll be a problem for a lot of people down the road. That's one of the factors. Like, it's one of my dreams of dreams to get one of my own handmade games onto Switch, which I've got right here. Like, I'm a big
Yeah.
Nintendo fan, as you can probably tell back here. I'm a big Nintendo
Oh,
fan.
yes, I can. Yes.
Yeah, you can't see. I don't know why you can't see. There's a Game Boy here, but there's a Rob the Robot that's off screen for some reason. But
Oh, yes, I can see indeed your shrine. Yes.
yeah. So like I want to do it. And like, previously I was using like a JavaScript HTML5 tech stack, which is like, from what I've heard, is still possible, but you know how it is. It's like the difference between Unity, which is like ready to go, games already on Switch and every console you can imagine, versus, almost any other platform. There's always like, oh, great for everything, but you're never going to get it on Android, or you're never going to get it on consoles, or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard some whispers about, I think it's called W4, but there's a new, like a corporate entity has sprung up to support, like from out of Godot has sprung up to support just specifically that proprietary console integration. So I'm like, hey, that could be a thing.
That could be good, because for me, it's, I am not in this life to be a console porting programmer. I don't want to have to recreate all of this knowledge from scratch. So if you give me, if I can give you a reasonable amount of money to fix this problem for me, then yeah, sure, please.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So I would love to talk about the game itself. I've always want to talk about the tech and how it's made, craft and stuff. But this is such a fascinating game. I was playing it yesterday. I noticed your tutorial alone, it has like a bigger scope than a lot of entire indie games, because there's just so much to offer there, right? You've got user interface, you've got all these different mechanics to walk the player through. I love how there's like customization in every step of the way. Like any two people who play the game will play it in drastically different ways and design their ships in completely different ways, right? So cool. Here's a question. Because the game has a lot of surface area, right? There's missions, there's a main campaign, the tutorial stuff. How do you handle that giant surface area and bring that all home? You know what I mean? How do you handle it? Because it's a big game, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, it's in a genre of like real-time strategy, even grand strategy, which usually is handled by like teams and not individuals. And I mean, the simple answer is, well, that's why it took 9 years.
Fair enough. Yeah,
that's the simple answer. And yeah, otherwise it's trying to be smart about where to put effort, which I haven't always been. There's a few features in the game where I sometimes wonder if I just should not have committed to them at all. Yeah, apart from that, I try to be very in touch with my user community and get a lot of feedback. And one of the things that's kind of tricky but important is also basically teaching them how to give better feedback and give better bug reports. Because, players are human beings. They're like, oh, this doesn't work well. But of course, what I need ideally is some really professional bug report, which has all of this information in. And so for people who've been with the game for a long time, I really put in effort saying, like, if you want these problems fixed, then here's all the information you need to give me. And there's definitely borne fruit that I feel, we have a much better report now. They understand what I need from them. And then in return, they get their problems fixed, and I can actually listen to them and not just be like, well, that sounds bad, but I don't know how to fix it.
Interesting. Yeah, like a lot of gamers will just say, it's broken or it doesn't work.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, help me out here. Like from the developer's perspective, it's like, what kind of computer are you on? What operating system version? What version of the game are you on? Do you have enough memory? What are your computer stats? What are the steps to reproduce? Do you have a video to go with it? Like just this laundry list of things we want other than like the gamer. I mean, it makes perfect sense if you've never touched development, you don't know anything about it, and you just want to play a video game. You're like, that's your starting point is, hey, it's broken. But to us, that's not helpful. Like I can't fix it's broken, right? I can fix a page of information, perhaps, right?
Yeah, for me, like a big click moment was like a decade ago when I was working on a different game and some people trying it out. And it was this this sort of interactive fiction game in the science fiction universe, and you could send down your away team to a planet, and then one of the away team members would be attacked by this creature and they'd be injured. And like, if you had the doctor, you could like help them, but sometimes the crew member who was injured was the doctor, and then that was, a bigger problem. And they got this feedback message saying, like, look, this is so badly written, this is so unfair. Why did you program it so it's always the doctor who gets injured? I was like, I didn't. It was like, okay, yeah, sure enough. I mean, okay, if like 1,000 people play this, there's going to be some poor sod who, like, 3 times in a row, they play this mission, and each time the doctor gets injured. And from their point of view, of course, this has to be deliberate, right?
Interesting.
And from my point of view, it's like, no, this is just random chance. So one of the things is also that people assume that their experience with the game is typical and normal, and it might actually be some weird edge case, but they will talk to you as if their weird experience was the intended one, which can be a big source of confusion.
That's a great point. Yeah, because to them, it's almost as if you hard coded it. When they simulate your game in their head, they're like, you set this situation up for me, and you're like, no, I know how it works. That's literally a random call.
Yeah, you just got extremely unlucky.
Yeah, and like when I'm playing a game, sometimes I'm trying to figure out, what I'm doing wrong or what the problem is. Sometimes in your head, you'll be like, is that random, or is that hard coded, or is there a way, like if I wait a certain amount of time, like what changes that from happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times gamers don't know that's kind of how it works. I think it's especially interesting with, roguelikes are bigger than ever. And the whole thing is it's very random. And so, each experience a player has will be different than another player. And, that's been a hard thing to explain to people, right? Some of the words we've seen is like ever changing levels and stuff like that. Because, you and I will say things like procedural generation. We know what that means, but a gamer might be like, what? Generate what? Right? And so we kind of have to like break through the jargon and help people understand, like, no, it's different every time you play and every time they play. I love that. Have you found that, like, I noticed you've got obviously Steam gives you a pre-built community, and then Itch gives you the option to enable your community. And so it looks like you've got 2 thriving communities going there. And so do you manage them both? Like, do you go and spend time in those communities? And do you have like a schedule with that, or do you just kind of do it ad hoc?
I just do it ad hoc. I would say the most important one is probably Discord these days. The game has a pretty active Discord. And with Steam, I will just pop in every few days, or like more often when I can, and I will answer questions and so on. And that's pretty easy. With Discord, the community is big enough that there's like volunteer moderators and everything, because it's a big enough community that you actually have to moderate it. And that's also really nice. It's really is a community now, not just there's some people. There's definitely, because the game's so old, have people who've known each other playing this game for half a decade or something.
Oh wow, yeah, that's really interesting. My buddy and I used to podcast. We started like 2011. And so I've got, a fair chunk of listeners who've stayed with me the whole time in this new Make the Game podcast. They're listening too, right? And what's interesting has been so much time has passed. It's been a decade now that a lot of them were like, I was listening to your show and I was making my first game, and now they've got careers. I'm like, oh, that's 10 years. Yeah. In 10 years, you get yourself a whole career. You could graduate college and, you've been in a company for 6 years. Like, yeah, that's really interesting. Time passes and the people change along with that time. Here's a question. So I noticed your game is translated into several different languages. Very cool. What has that localization been like for you?
It's been kind of difficult. I mean, I definitely, as someone, my first language is German, so, I sort of feel like, it's definitely good to have this localization in. It's a game, because it has so much user interface, there is a lot of text. There's several thousand lines of text that need to be translated. And the hard thing about game translation is that you can get professional translators, and they will give you really high quality in terms of like the language being correct, but they haven't played your game or haven't played it intensively. and so sometimes they just miss the context. Um, Sometimes with funny results, where it's just like, no, that's not what I meant with that word. Um, Sometimes things are just a bit off, and on the other hand, you have fans, and fans often actually want to translate things, and there's sort of two problems. One is that the translations can be kind of idiosyncratic, not even necessarily bad, but idiosyncratic. And the other one is, in practice, I do accept fan translations, but I feel bad because, hey, I'm not paying you for this. I make my money off this, but I'm not paying you for this. So in practice, the game has had a number of contributions now by fans where, honestly, people have just been like, please put this in the game, please put this in the game. And I even entered and said, like, okay, I will do this, but you have to understand that technically I'm exploiting you here. You're just giving me stuff and I'm not paying you for it. But yeah, it's definitely hard. I don't really think there's a good solution to having really good translation without spending a huge amount of money, which I can't afford.
Right.
So that's tough, and I'm not even sure what I'm going to do for future projects. Because sometimes I wonder, like, okay, there's a Chinese translation, but how many people in China use that one, and how many people are just like, well, I'm going to use the English one because it's better.
Right. Well, that's a good question. Then is have you found it to be worthwhile the time you put into translations, or sounds like you might not do it again, or has it been?
So obviously the problem with any question like this is that I can't, look in the alternate universe where I didn't do it.
For sure.
I feel like it's been worthwhile, especially like about 10% or so or more of sales are in China. And wow. I have the feeling that, it wouldn't sell nearly as well if there wasn't a simplified Chinese translation. So I think I think it is probably worth it. But I think it really depends on what kind of game you make. If it's like a huge narrative game, then that's probably unsustainably expensive. If it's like an abstract puzzle game where you need to translate exactly 3 words from the main menu, then yeah, sure, go ahead, translate it into 300 languages.
Yeah. So did you do English and German yourself? Did you just start with those two?
So I did English and German myself, and then I contracted out the other ones to a translation company, and I have also received some feedback on translations and tried to improve them based on what players have been saying.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. I noticed yesterday I was looking around your Steam page and you posted a really big art and lore post.
Yeah.
You kind of described your universe and did some world building. I think that's so cool. And so do you just, you write the lore yourself? You just invent it and put it on paper?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is like a bunch of things I've been thinking about for a while. Sort of, obviously if you create a game, even if you don't put stuff into it explicitly, it's still useful to have an idea of what's going on in the background so you don't contradict yourself too much. Also, you have some kind of underlying tone. And I find that people actually really like those, like this sort of background lore stuff. Because obviously it's when I'm a fan of a game, I really enjoy any additional information about this. I'll be Definitely. Just like reading the development blog, I'll be reading the whatever, and I'll be like, give me more. And it's also a nice break because it's not programming, so it kind of engages different aspects of it.
I love that. Yeah.
And the other thing which I also found is I've also done some really in-depth articles or pretty in-depth articles on development. I really went into like, so yeah, this is how I fixed this bug, or this is how I developed this, and people also really like those. Like, you don't underestimate the sort of technological interest of players that they want to know about these details.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just game development in general, and I always assume I'm like, it's a devlog. People love those, right? Everybody wants to read a devlog, and then the reality hits sometimes where it's like, your average gamer was probably not that interested, and I'm like, oh, right. it's just us creative types, but there's a lot of us, right?
Yeah, I've actually found that like often like the boring devlogs are ones where you just sort of you slip into this sort of marketing language and you just give them some screenshots and you're like, now you can do this, now you can do that, and we did this and so on. It's kind of boring. But it's like bug fixes, or like here's a funny bug and here's how I fixed it. That can actually tell a really interesting story. So this can be a lot more engaging.
Interesting. This is a total compliment. I bet you probably get this sometimes. Is I got total Subset Games vibes when I was playing Airships. So like I got reminded a little bit of like Into the Breach and FTL. I'm guessing you sometimes get some FTL comparisons because you've got that really cool mechanic where your ship, you can actually see the little characters walking around and moving between the modules in the ship, which is just so detailed and cool. And I also noticed this is a tip I picked up from Subset Games Talk, which was they were introducing lore and personality into their game. And so they've got these buildings where the insects will attack the buildings. And these little text bubbles will appear where it's like, mommy, help, or, and you've got those bubbles in Airships. And I love that, where I was like playing and I'm like, how am I doing? Oh, and my people were like, I'm bleeding. And I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Yes. Yeah, I think the very first sort of elevator pitch of the game was steampunk FTL. I mean, it moved away from that, but that Beautiful. Was sort of the initial thing.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Subset. I played a ton of Into the Breach.
I mean, Into the Breach is just it's definitely a game I'm really envious of, just in terms of like, oh wow, it's such a good design.
So good. Yeah, it's so clean. It's so smart. Yeah, I'm super jealous on that one. Here's a question. So the game's doing real well on Steam. Congratulations. Is this something that you attribute to just having built a great product over a long period of time, or are you the kind of developer who gets, because like I've got some friends who are like obsessed with the Steam numbers, right? Like when Steam sales are there, they jump into it and they look at the graphs and they know the Steam hardware analytics numbers, like they follow all that stuff. So I'm wondering where you fall on that spectrum. Like, do you just throw it out there and hope for the best, or are you in there like fascinated by the Steam algorithm and trying to learn the Steam system? Like, where are you at in there?
Maybe somewhere in the middle. So I've tried being really into those numbers, and I have done a bunch of like I did some regression analysis on them, for example. And to be honest, they seem to be mostly nonsense.
That sounds right.
So the thing is that I think you can. Yes, I think of course you have to be on the ball. Of course you have to be aware of what you're doing. But you can also really drive yourself mad by seeing patterns where honestly, because the thing is with a game my size, one day to the next, sales would just double or half. And that's just the noise, It's like, I used to get really obsessed, like, I know the game only sold this number of copies. Everything's doomed. And nowadays I'm just like, if there's a large scale trend, I'll notice eventually because there's so much noise. So I definitely think that somewhere the Steam algorithm likes the game. They're locked into something. And I, try to not upset it. And apart from that, I try to especially get YouTubers interested in it, try to get some visibility for the game. But I try to not drive myself mad with it.
How do you go about that? Like that's it's almost like an art, right? Is contacting the YouTubers. I've done a fair amount of that, and sometimes it's great success. Like I'll have 100 people ignore me, but then you get that one person who plays it, and you're like, yes. How do you just email them, or how do you do it?
I wish I could, share some amazing tips at this point, but I really can't. I just email them. I'm like, hi, I have this game. Here's some cool things about it. Here's a Steam key. Email me if you have any questions. And almost always I don't get an answer back. And then sometimes I get a very polite rejection, and they usually say, thank you for, bothering. And very, very rarely, it clicks, and sometimes it can be a huge success. So it is worth it, but it's not easy, and I don't think there's a silver bullet.
Fair, yeah, good answer. Here's one. I noticed, so I was reading your lore, and also your game has really nice key art. There's some really cool looking characters who are gathered around like a war
Mhm,
map. It really sets the stage for like, command these ships, which is,
mhm.
totally the gameplay. Is that something that you went out and commissioned? Because you've got a bunch of different arts like plastered throughout the lore, and not just the key art, but a bunch of stuff in game. How
Yeah,
do you get that done?
yeah. I commission people. Basically, I find artists whose style I think fit the game, and then I commission the art for them. I try to, be a good customer in the sense of actually giving them the information that they need, and not be just like, oh, I make something like this, but be like, here's a bunch of references, here's this kind of thing I would like, but maybe here's a sketch or whatever, so they actually have something to work from, and then of course actually pay them on time. That sort of thing,
I
at
love
least I
that.
try to do. Because I used to do a lot of contract work, and I know how annoying it is if you have a customer who's just vague and doesn't communicate. Yeah, so that's what I do because yeah, I try to do that myself and get very well. I
Yeah,
think
makes a
it
lot of
does
sense.
make it. Of course, it's definitely expensive, but I think it does make a difference in terms of giving people an idea of what it could kind of look like.
Yeah, I think so. I saw some advice recently that was like somebody said they would put this is like a Steam optimization thing, but they said they would put their entire marketing budget into just the little what do you call it, the little
The
thumbnail,
capsule.
the capsule. Yeah, that thing.
Yes, I think
They're
I
like
saw the same video. Yeah, it was like, look, if you've got $500,
that was
pay an
it.
artist $500 to make a nice capsule image. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to find that video and link to it if I can find it. I watched so many recently. I don't know if I'm going to remember which one that was, but I thought that was really surprising because what I'd heard, the advice, advice changes as the world changes, right? But
Oh
the
yes.
previous advice, yeah, I heard was like trailer, make the best trailer ever, and then it was like key art, more important and better bang for your buck. It sounds like.
Hmm.
How about trailers? Is that something you make yourself, or likewise, do you commission them out?
That's something I make myself. With trailers, I mean it's a very amateur operation. I will basically use OBS to record a bunch of game footage, and then I will put it into a really ancient copy of iMovie, and I
Oh
will like
wow,
cut it together into little bits, and then at the end of it, I have a trailer, and
that's
I don't
awesome.
know. I don't know if it's as good as a professionally made one, but it kind of works. And as you know, like the most important thing about trailers is make them short and show gameplay immediately. Don't like do three logos and narrative intro or something.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I watched the trailers. I think they're super cool and they show so much cool visuals, especially like the big graphics. This is a fun question, I think, is so you've got these monsters, multiple different kinds of monsters with these huge tentacles that like they kind of like break outside of the grid and they've got these really cool curves. How did you get that done? That sounds like difficult to render the graphics correctly, difficult to calculate collisions and all that, right? It sounds like a kind of a hard
Mm-hmm.
problem.
So with the tentacles specifically, the tentacles really have sort of a physics-based animation. So it models the tentacles as a series of segments, and each of the segments has like a spring constant and kind of a virtual muscle and so on. And the reason I did this was simply I don't know anything about animation. So I was like, look, I don't know how to animate this properly, but I know some stuff about physics. So I'm just going to simulate it instead and then tweak the simulation until it looks good. Yeah, I'm very happy with it because I think it's really a cool visual thing of like, oh wow, it's got one of my it's eaten him. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things that I saw in the trailer where you're like, okay, cool. Oh, airships, I got it. Oh, super customizable, very cool, and like real time combat. And then these tentacles appeared. You're like, whoa, like that kind of took the to the next level to me. You know what I mean? Where I was like, I go from
Mm-hmm.
like interested to like, walking down the marketing funnel. I'm like, okay, very cool. I'm
Yeah,
convinced.
from a game design point of view, of course, the point with monsters is that monsters don't have to follow the same rules as airships, and so they
Mm,
can create these interesting challenges of having to pick specific tactics to fight against them.
very cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Um, so I'm wondering, what's next for you? Do you have like is there any time that you would eventually stop with Airships, or is it like your lifetime game? And do you have another game that's starting to speak to you? You know what I mean? Is there another game on the
Yeah,
horizon?
so I have a perfectly nice and very fun prototype for a new game that's been
Ooh,
around for a while, actually. I'm not working on that right now. I'm working on an expansion pack for Airships.
cool.
Um, both because I want to. I think the update launch went really well. I'm quite motivated to put some more stuff in there. And also because, as I said before, right now, I literally don't know what engine I would use for a new project.
Mm.
I honestly want to bide my time for a year or so and see what happens in that space.
Wow, that's
Um,
a good
but
spot to be in.
it's okay because I can do that. And I think people, I've been telling people a bit about the expansion pack, where the idea is you can have like heroes, like captains, you can get for your ships, which can give them special abilities and so on. And I
Ooh.
think that will be a really cool addition. It's a kind of an obvious one, but I think it will be cool. And so, yeah, I'm working on that right now.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great that you can take the time to wait because I'm doing something similar where like my next code base probably would not be built on Unity, and like I'm doing what I think a lot of people are doing, where I'm waiting until Godot 4 comes out before I seriously
Mm-hmm.
investigate Godot because I don't want to have to relearn. And I've kind of already done that with some Unity packages where it's like, oh, you're doing that the old way. There's a new way now, and I'm like, I know that
So,
that's how Godot 3 to 4 is going to be like that. I'm sure. So I'm like, I'm just going to wait, but it's a brutal wait, and you can't wait forever, right?
yeah, totally. No, I don't intend to work in airships until, death. At least I hope not. But right now, I feel like, yeah, I want to do an expansion. That will be fun. And then we'll see.
I am fascinated by the games where the developers are just like, I might never stop working on this game, like Dwarf Fortress. Like
Yes,
from what
yes.
I don't follow it very closely. I know some people are obsessed, but like I haven't heard a whisper of them being like, we're thinking about starting to wind down. Like I haven't heard that. In fact, in recent years, it's now being published by Kitfox and it's got UI updates and graphic packages. I'm like, I don't know how long they've been working on it, but it's got to be approaching 2 decades or something. And yeah, I mean, as long as the game is paying your bills and you don't want to stop, like why, right?
Yeah,
Do what you
totally.
want.
I think as long as you're having fun creating this thing and inhabiting this sort of world, that's great. And I think, once honestly, once again becomes sprawling enough, it incorporates so many different elements anyway that you're working on one end of it for a while, then you work on something else, and the game's big enough that it's almost as if you were working on two different games. So
I like that.
that kind of works.
I like that. Yeah, and it creates, especially for a solo developer, that would create um, less work for you to like. If you only have the one game, you don't have to create another Steam page and worry about marketing that or cut. You could just be like everything into this one game. I like that.
Of course, it's a totally eggs in one basket thing. I mean, my nightmare scenario is that Steam does something to the algorithm, and all of a sudden, no one buys my game anymore. If that happens, I will cope somehow, but I hope it doesn't.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen too. I think it's a really cool game. I will definitely link to it in the show notes. Hope everybody checks it out. It's Airships, Conquer the Skies. Super cool. Last episode, I announced my new game, Witchmore. I love it. I just like saying it. Anyway, I wanted to thank everyone for all the lovely emails and Discord messages and Twitter DMs. It's so exciting to me that you're already telling me you'll buy the game. That's very encouraging. Thank you. Sadly, there's no itch or Steam page yet, so you can't buy Witchmore at the moment, but there are other ways to support the show, including buy my tutorial package, Making Big Indie Games. For $100, you get about a movie's worth of game dev tutorials walking you through how to increase the scope of your game. Check out the Amazon wishlist for gear to help make the show. Write a review for Make the Game on your favorite podcast app. That helps a lot. And subscribe, like, share, all those YouTube-y things. Before we go, my question for you is, what's your favorite dish? Favorite recipe? What's different about them? What's similar about them? Do this again with video games. To answer, tweet at me or send me a voice recording at anchor.fm. Thank you for listening. You're being played out by Action Strike, which you are free to use in your own projects. Now it's time for you to go make the game.